Welcome to the First Parish in Framingham. We are a welcoming congregation, so whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on your life's journey, you are welcome here. If today marks your first visit with us, a special welcome to you. We welcome you here in the Meeting House, on YouTube or on Zoom, or wherever and whenever you may be watching this service in the future. I am Diane Bassett. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the clerk of the Board of Assessors, and today I am your worship associate. Please take a moment to read the announcements in the order of service. Immediately following worship, you're invited to join us for coffee and conversation in Scott Hall just across the courtyard. Please also take a moment to turn your phones or other devices to their quietest settings. Beeps and buzzes can be distracting, though we welcome your human noises, especially the sound of your singing, so please join in. Since 1701, people have gathered as this community to rest or recharge, to be challenged or affirmed. Those people are like you. You belong here. Maybe only for the next hour, but we hope for longer. We're happy to have you with us. I invite you now to take a deepening breath in and out. Continue to take a few more breaths and begin to release whatever you need to let go of to be more fully present here to yourself, one another, and to the sacred in this time and place. A flame within a chalice is a primary symbol of the Unitarian-Universalist faith tradition. To symbolize the light of reason, the warmth of community, and the flame of hope, it is our tradition to begin our worship by kindling the flame of our chalice. Lisa Garcia Sampson writes, "In these wild, historic, and uncertain times, we gather to remember who we are, who we belong to, and what we are called to do. As we light this chalice, we kindle the spirit of the great turning, the movement for justice alive in this nation today. May we feel it in our bones and in the stillness of this hour. May we sense it calling our name." Please rise in body or spirit to join in singing our opening hymn, number 95, "There is More Love Somewhere." And please remain standing following the hymn for our sung and spoken words of affirmation.
People
Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve all life with compassion, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God.
This is the time in our service that we have set aside for sharing of the things which weigh deepest on our hearts, our milestones, our happy and our sad occasions. We share them to build community. We share them because joy shared is joy expanded, and sorrow shared can feel as though the whole is holding our burdens. You can submit them online or at the back of the sanctuary in the book that I have here. We intersperse into our sharing the song, "There is a Love." We do this so that the joys and sorrows can be held with song, but also so that you might have a song to sing when you need it most. We rest in this love. These sorrows rest in the love of our gathered community. One member of our congregation writes this deep sorrow and concern over tomorrow's inauguration. I know it did not have to be like this. Sherry Whittemore shares this sorrow. I spent Christmas with my cousin Bart, who was more my big brother. We knew it would be our last one together, and that we were saying goodbye. The goodbye became final last Sunday. Terry Dixon shares this sorrow about the death of his former mother-in-law. Her funeral was held on Saturday, holding my ex-wife, our daughters, and the whole family in light. And Ben Long shares this sorrow. I'm thinking of those still suffering from the California wildfires. Let us sing, "There is a Love." There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. And these are the joys of our community. Jim shares this joy. Emmy is happy to be 5 years old and to have church friends around. The Packards share this joy that Veronica and Amanda took part in their first musical at Framingham High. They're taking the set down today. It was a phenomenal presentation. And Dave Doucette shares this joy. The clock here has been stopped for a few weeks because a pole between the Edgell Road face broke and disconnected from the clock. Dave writes, I removed the pole and yokes and started the clock on Thursday. The time is correct in the face toward the common and the parish house. The one facing Edgell Road will be correct twice a day. Let us sing, There is a Love Holding Us. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. And we light a final candle for all of those joys and all of those sorrows that remain too great to share, but still weigh heavily on our hearts. So now we turn our attention to the quiet of this space, to the people sitting to our left and our right. We return our attention to that which is supporting us, and we return our attention to our breath in and our breath out, a unifying and connecting breath. O Spirit of life, O Spirit of love, we call you by many names or no name at all. And I still believe that love that is holding all that we love calls us each by our true first name, which is beloved. I give thanks for this community, for the joys, for the milestones, for the nitty-gritty work of making church happen, for all those who keep time, for those who fold the papers, for those who show up when we need it most. I give thanks for all of the long-haul people that make our congregation what it is. We know, too, that there are those in our midst who are mourning, those struggling to live into new realities, new times of life. May the strength of this gathered community help. May it support those living into new times in their lives, as this congregation has done for the generations before us. In this great moment of turning, we acknowledge those that are fearful, those with anxiety about the state of our world. Here too we turn to the strength of this community. When the courageous call comes, may we respond in the ways that we know best, or the ways that those impacted know best. There is strength in showing up. From time to time, we make mistakes. We are gloriously human after all. Humans are promise-making and promise-breaking and promise-renewing creatures. When we are ready, we can return to right relationship because we are breathing. I say these words and do all things for love's sake. May it be so, and amen. Now we have a few more moments of quiet in this house. In a world that demands so much of us, this is our time to do absolutely nothing for a minute. To listen, pray the prayers of our own hearts, or simply rest. In a turbulent world, may we be reminded that we can always return to the center, the quiet that we have felt here by focusing on our breath and taking a few more breaths in quiet.
One of our former ministerial interns, Elizabeth Murphy, reminds us, First Parish leaders, both volunteers and staff members, work diligently throughout the year to be careful and attentive stewards of the congregation and its funds. Countless meetings, reports, documents, and budgets are necessary to maintain the health of an organization, especially one that has endured for over 324 years. We depend on our tools and on our teams to track where every dollar goes, and they do just that. But the gifts you make to our weekly offering or through your annual pledge represent far more than those lines on a spreadsheet. Your contributions are a tangible commitment to the mission and vision of First Parish. Each time you give, you renew this commitment. And as a result, your support is entwined with all that we believe, all that we do here together. This is its own special gift. We draw special attention to the fact that we now have QR codes in the pews, which you can scan to make your offering electronically. In the spirit of trust and generosity, we gratefully accept the offering.
Wow, choir. Thank you. Beautiful. I always wonder the difference in the sound. Back there, it sounded gorgeous, and I'm sure for you in the position where you were meant to hear these beautiful words, it sounded even better. Thank you. Each year, the persistent question is, what do we say about Martin Luther King Jr., his words, his legacy, his ministry? In this day where we are some 95 years after his birth, 56 years after his death, 2 generations. What relevancy do his words have to meet our modern moment? Now, I know you will not have to look too far to see quotes slightly out of context from the I Have a Dream speech, or see other quotes shared with his name and face. So this morning, I want to go a little deeper than the I Have a Dream speech to explore some of his other words. With the question in my mind, what does all of this have to say to us on January 19th, 2025? A colleague of mine was listening to some more conservative podcasters, and they were calling attention to the more radical king, saying, don't you know what this man has said on the more radical side? Of course, I'm reminded that folks on the other side of the aisle always want to draw more attention to that radical side. Both sides wanting us to pay attention to the more radical king. But before we get there, I need to address the psychic elephant in the room. Not quite the way that you might think I will do so. I wonder, how will we do justice work when it feels like we are so small, when despair feels like a decent option to go to, especially after we notice and feel how small we are? Well, first of all, I have already discussed it with Terry, who is preaching next week, so he's going to talk about it from his perspective, which I am glad of, but I want to start the conversation now. There's a teaching in the Talmud, the rabbinical literature, the commentary on the Torah, that says whoever saves a single life is considered by Scripture to have saved the whole world. The Quran says something quite similar. If anyone saves a life, it shall be as though he had saved the lives of all mankind. Just because we may not be able to save the totality of society does not absolve us from trying to save or improve even the life of one person. This work of rebuilding the beautiful and broken world depends on all of us, saving the world in the ways that we know best, saving the lives of the people who are most impacted, which we know this will look different because every life is different. Every life will need saving in different ways in the days to come. For if we cared about saving our neighbors, then we would have neighborhoods that cared about each other. And if we had neighborhoods that cared about each other, we would have cities that cared about each other. And then we would have caring states as well. You see where the math is going on this. Our care and concern for our siblings would ripple outward. I have noticed that, I have noticed that those in leadership roles in any social justice movement seem to vibrate at a different frequency than the rest of us. Have you noticed that? They offer these new perspectives. They inspire, and it's perhaps important that not all of us end up being leaders. Leaders seem to see above the action. And if everyone was that high up, well, you would not be able to see. Now, I know despair feels like the radio preset that we have playing as we drive around lately. It is imperative, we must find ways to reject despair. Our despair, I believe, will not be permanent. Just like our joy, that will also not be permanent, unfortunately. Those are temporary feelings and emotion. King reminds us, yes, the dawn will come. Disappointment, sorrow, and despair, they are all born at midnight, but we may be consoled by the fact that morning will come. Prophecy, that is seeing through the times and speaking truth to power, is accessed through joy. What do I mean by that? I want you to imagine whenever you see or hear prophetic words or actions, remember this. Martin Luther King Jr., he loved Star Trek. He once watched the World Series with African-American mystic Howard Thurman. There are pictures of King, yes, speaking from the Lincoln Memorial. There are also pictures of him swimming. Howard Thurman, he learned clarinet later in life, and he had an extensive collection of penguin figurines. I read once that his wife said, Howard is actually more thrilled if you ask him about his paintings than he is about his justice work. Remember that James Luther Adams, the prophet theologian of our tradition, loved the movie Kung Fu and martinis as well. That Coretta Scott King, she was a trained singer. It reminds me that behind the words and the actions that we lift up tomorrow and many other days, it reminds me that there had to be joy for the prophetic words to flow. It reminds me too that joy is in fact prophetic and is a form of resistance. After all, the rabbis taught that prophecy can only be accessed through joy. There is a place for despair, for sometimes despair comes from us seeing the brokenness that is in our world. Despair can cause us to freeze, but the first moments after despair, when you start to imagine a different world, when we begin to see possibility, when we see hope, and we begin to imagine that new future, that is when the haze starts to lift. So in today's sermon, I share some quotes and context of Dr. Martin Luther King, and I want us to imagine together what prophetic space they might be inviting us into. Our first quote is from a collection of Martin Luther King Jr.'s writing called A Knock at Midnight. He first delivered a version of this sermon as early as 1958. I do need to say, as we are likely all aware, that King's language is a product of his time. I hope that if King were still preaching today, he would have used more inclusive language around humanity. King preaches this: the church must be reminded once again that it is not the master or the servant of the state, but the conscience of the state. It must be the guide and the critic of the state, never its tool. As long as the church is a tool of the state, it will be unable to provide even a modicum of bread for men at midnight. If the church does not recapture its prophetic zeal and cease to be an echo of the status quo, it will be relegated to an irrelevant social club with no moral or spiritual authority. If the church does not actively participate in the struggle for peace, economic, and racial justice, it will forfeit the loyalty of millions and cause men everywhere to know that there is an institution whose will is atrophied. But if the church will free itself from the shackles of a deadening status quo and recover its great historic mission, will proceed to speak and act fearlessly and insistently on the questions of justice and peace, it will enkindle the imagination of mankind. It will fire the souls of men and imbue them with a glowing and ardent love for justice, truth, and peace. Men far and near will then see the church as that great fellowship of love which provides light and bread for lonely travelers at midnight. As I hear these words, I first of all remember that King was a pastor, first and foremost. He served as the pastor of the Dexter Avenue Church when he first preached this sermon. So I have a feeling that while the church could be read as the church universal, the denomination with capital letters, King was also likely referring to his church, the church that he was serving. I am guessing, like any minister, he was concerned with the physical plant of the church and the everyday functions of the church. Oh, I wonder what it was like to be in a church board meeting with King. I'd love to know what that was like. I'd love to pick his brain, King, the church administrator. I share King's desire for us not to be the servant of the state, but rather the conscience of the state. I do not wish for us to be relegated to an irrelevant social club either, but rather something greater. And frankly, that scares me. But it would seem clear to me that a church that is centered in love, that would still be prophetic. It could still be the conscience of the state. Now, I realize that this is likely what the folks who are on the more Christian nationalist side of things, I have a feeling that is what they probably want as well. But I do see a difference in those wishes. Christian nationalism, in my eyes, equates patriotism with religiosity. The overlap of the Venn diagram of state and religion in their eyes is complete. One eclipses the other. And I find that separation is still absolutely necessary. You can't have critique when the overlap is that complete. And I'm still wrestling with this. I have been woefully ignorant of the dangers of Christian nationalism, which tries to install one version of Christianity as the only possible religion, the only operating system, so to speak, in our beautifully religiously diverse country. What needs to happen for us to be imbued with a glowing and ardent love for truth, justice, and peace? Well, our next quote always captures my attention here. This quote comes from the letter from the Birmingham City Jail. The scene, I'll set it briefly. King has been arrested for the 13th time. 8 white moderate clergymen urged the demonstrations in the city to stop, saying, "Go slow at this." The people that wrote this letter, the clergymen, they were rabbis, bishops, Methodist ministers, Presbyterian ministers, and a few others. And so in the margins of a newspaper, on scrap paper, and finally he was provided pads of paper, King wrote this response to those 8, in part writing, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied to a single garment of destiny. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Never again can we afford to live with the narrow, provincial, outside agitator idea. Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere in this country." This passage convicts me. It reminds me that I am impacted by injustice everywhere else. Yes, I acknowledge I may feel safe in a so-called blue state, but I cannot stand idly by while my neighbor's blood is shed. That's from Leviticus. It speaks to me about interdependence as well. This passage encourages me, knowing that whatever work that is done is pulling us toward a better world. We are all connected. If injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, then also maybe the reverse is true. Justice anywhere is a threat to injustice everywhere. In the last book that Martin Luther King wrote, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos to Community, he wrote these words, saying, first, the line of progress is never straight. For a period, a movement may follow a straight line, and then it encounters obstacles, and the path bends, like it is curving around a mountain where you are approaching a city. Often it will feel like you are moving backwards and you lose sight of your goal, but in fact, you are moving ahead, and soon you will again see the city closer by. Perhaps that is the most comfort to me. I do not have high hopes for increasing justice and protection with the new administration that will be sworn in tomorrow, especially in the realm of protections for our lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender beloved, especially in the realm of this climate-changed world, especially for our undocumented beloved. If my worst-case scenario imagination mind is correct, it feels like we are taking several steps backwards. Therefore, King's words are a comfort to me. These words King wrote while taking a break in Jamaica, away from the demands of the civil rights movement, without even a telephone in his small house. It reminds me of the phrase, the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. I have often thought of that moral arc as something that we have to work to pull on, to bring it closer to justice, to the world that we dream about. But maybe it is instead about bringing us closer towards justice. Maybe the moral arc of the universe will get close, but it will never truly reach justice. What if we never actually reach our goal of rebuilding this broken and beautiful world? In that same book, King wrote the final quote that I will share this morning. He says, in the days ahead, we must not consider it unpatriotic to raise certain basic questions about our national character. We must begin to ask, why were there 40 million people in a nation overflowing with such unbelievable affluence? Why has our nation placed itself in the position of being God's military agent on earth and intervened recklessly in Vietnam and the Dominican Republic? Why have we substituted the arrogant undertaking of policing the whole world for the high task of putting our own house in order? When I consider the advice that I have heard, do not obey in advance, the question of the certain basic question and the role of it becomes necessary. Dissent is patriotic, we must remember. King's words, though 57 years old, seem relevant to meet the moment of this modern era. The challenge has been long, and the solution may yet be still a long time coming. But the basic question is disarming. How do people starve in a world where there is affluence? And returning to that question, when the politico spin doctors create an answer that is convoluted, this must be our work. So my friends gathered here, it seems likely that King's work will never die. We hear about the three deaths: when the body ceases to function, when the body is consigned to the grave, and when the person's name is spoken for the last time. It will be a long time before King experiences that third death, and it may never come. His words and deeds will live on as long as there are people that toil for justice. His words, his legacy in this day, again, nearly 100 years after his birth, 2 generations after his death, they continue to speak to us. Let us imagine the world that he dreamed about, that the prophets of every age have dreamed about, what they dreamed be ours to do, hope their hopes, and seal them true. May we remember these lessons and apply them in the ways that we know best, today, tomorrow, and in the days to come. May we be strengthened in this work. May it be so, and amen. I invite you to rise in body or spirit, both work just fine, to sing our closing hymn number 1018, that's in the turquoise hymnal. Come and go with me to that land. And so as we leave this friendly place, let us take the light of love out into the world and use it to brighten our pathways. And when we need to rest or recharge, be challenged or affirmed, may that light guide us safely back. May we hold the light always, and the light hold us always. Amen. And go in peace.